When we moved into our new house, it felt like a fresh start. We had always been a very religious family, and one of the first things we did was establish a daily routine of prayer throughout the house. From the very first day, we walked through every room, praying to purify the space and invite peace into our new home. It became something of a ritual for us, something comforting, something that gave us a sense of protection and security. The house was quiet, peaceful, and full of potential. The walls, freshly painted, seemed to hum with an energy that made us feel hopeful. As we said our prayers, we could almost feel the weight of our faith filling the rooms, giving everything a calm spiritual presence. There was a kind of tranquility in the air, a deep sense of well-being. We believed that with the strength of our prayers, no negativity could touch us here. Every morning and night, we would gather together and walk through the house, anointing each room, ensuring that no space was left untouched. My parents were especially diligent, and I, though younger, followed along, seeing this as a sacred duty. It became our way of making sure that our home remained safe, that no harm could come to us. Little did we know, our peaceful routine was about to clash with something far more sinister, something that didn't want us there. But at that moment, we couldn't have imagined what was about to unfold. As time passed, I started noticing something odd about our neighbor. At first, he seemed like an ordinary man, quiet, unremarkable. But slowly, his behavior began to shift, and I couldn't ignore the strange tension building between us. He seemed irritated by our presence, or more specifically, by our prayers. I couldn't understand why, but it was as if our peaceful rituals disturbed him in some way. It started subtly at first. He would rev his car engine loudly at 5 in the morning, waking us up from our sleep. The noise would echo through the entire neighborhood, and no matter how many times I tried to block it out, it always managed to break the calm. I couldn't help but feel it was intentional, like he was trying to disrupt our peace, but it didn't end there. One night, around midnight, he cranked up his karaoke system. The booming sound of the music blared through the walls, and the curse words he shouted over the microphone could be heard clearly, even with our windows closed. The volume was so high, it was as if he wanted to make sure we heard every word. It felt like an assault on the calm we had worked so hard to build in our home. I could feel the hostility in his actions, and I started to wonder if he was doing this to provoke us on purpose. I began to feel a deep unease whenever I saw him outside, as if there was something off about him. His behavior didn't make sense. Why was he so bothered by our prayers? It was as though he was trying to make us uncomfortable, to disrupt the harmony we had created. The more I thought about it, the more I suspected that his intentions were far from innocent. There was something darker at play, and I couldn't shake the feeling that our peaceful home was under some kind of attack. One night, something happened that I can never forget. It started with a strange sound, heavy, thudding footsteps that echoed through the house. The noise was so intense that it shook the walls, and I could feel the vibrations in the floor beneath my feet. The steps were large and deliberate, and the sound was unmistakable. But when I tried to make sense of it, I realized these steps didn't belong to any human or animal I knew. The weight of each step felt unnatural, like something far too heavy to be walking on our roof. My heart started racing, and I could see the fear in my family's eyes. We all stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. The steps continued, getting louder and closer, as though something or someone was moving rapidly across the roof, circling our house. Panic set in. I grabbed my family's hands and we ran outside as fast as we could, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was making those terrifying noises. We stood in the front yard looking up at the roof, but there was nothing there. The night was eerily still, with no signs of any movement. It was as if whatever had been walking on our roof had vanished into thin air, but the silence didn't comfort me. It only deepened the dread I felt. I knew something was wrong, something dark was lurking around us, and it had just made its presence known in the most terrifying way. Despite the absence of any physical evidence, the feeling of something sinister remained. The air was thick with unease, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been on our roof was still watching us. It was as if it was just waiting, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. That night, I knew for sure that something evil was targeting our family, and it wasn't going to stop anytime soon. Despite the growing discomfort, we decided not to give up on our prayers. Every day, without fail, we continued our routine of praying throughout the house, hoping that our faith would protect us from whatever dark presence seemed to be closing in. The more we prayed, the more determined we became, even as the tension between us and our strange neighbor grew unbearable. We believed that the power of our prayers could shield us from whatever evil was lurking around us. Then one day, something unexpected happened. Our neighbor, the source of much of the tension, suddenly separated from his wife and moved out of the house. At first, it seemed like a blessing. The relentless noise, the disturbances, and his provocations stopped overnight. For a brief moment, we felt a sense of relief, like a heavy weight had been lifted from our shoulders. But even with his departure, something didn't sit right with me. It felt as though his presence was still lingering in the air, like a dark cloud that hadn't quite dissipated. We continued our prayers, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the battle wasn't truly over. There was a part of me that wondered if our neighbor had left because something had finally driven him out, or if he had known that his time in that house was done. The uneasy feeling didn't fade away. Instead, it clung to us like a shadow, even as the days passed. Months later, as I spoke with some of the other neighbors, I learned a chilling truth. Our neighbor hadn't just been difficult or rude. He had been involved in dark spiritual practices. Apparently, he had been performing evil rituals for others, causing disturbances and stirring up negative energy wherever he went. I couldn't help but wonder if our prayers had somehow driven him away. But at the same time, the fear that something more sinister might still be out there stayed with me. After some time, I had the opportunity to speak with a few of the other neighbors, and the truth that came to light was both unsettling and enlightening. It turned out that our neighbor had been involved in dark spiritual practices, performing rituals for others and causing chaos in the neighborhood. His actions weren't just petty annoyances, they were part of something much more sinister. Everyone in the neighborhood had felt the tension, but no one had known the full extent of what he was involved in. Once he left, the relief from all the neighbors was palpable, and I began to wonder if the house was finally at peace. I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. We had always believed in the power of prayer, and it had been a constant part of our lives. The more I thought about it, the more I felt that our daily prayers might have been the reason the evil energy had been driven away. Maybe, just maybe, our faith had been strong enough to protect us and purify the house. But even so, I couldn't fully dismiss the nagging feeling that something dark still lingered in the air. The thought that our prayers might have been the force that pushed him out was comforting. Yet it didn't completely erase the fear that had taken root in me. I still wondered if the danger was truly gone, or if something else had happened that we couldn't understand. The memories of the strange events, the unsettling noises, and the oppressive presence didn't fade as easily as I'd hoped. In the end, I found myself grateful for the relief, but I was left questioning everything. Did our prayers protect us, or was there something else at play that we just couldn't see? I'll never know for sure, but I'll always remember the fear that followed us until he left, and the strange feeling that whatever had been tormenting us might not be entirely gone.